The $1 Million Challenge is headed to Gainesville this year for the LSU Florida game.
Oh, nothing like a game in the swamp.
I'd step out on that field in front of all those crazy Gators and I'd throw a laser.
Imagine that crowd going crazy. Marty.
Would either of y'all ever put your head in a Gator's mouth? I'd do it for $1 million.
It'd mess up your hair, though.
Enter at EckridgeFootball.com for your chance to win $1 million in the Florida LSU game.
Nope. Wouldn't move an inch.
Welcome in. I'm Mike Renner. He's Steve Palazzolo, and this is our Florida Gators season preview brought to you by Eckrich, the official smoked sausage of the Florida Gators. Steve, Florida, not their best year a season ago. Dan Mullen, new coach, but there's reason to believe they'll be better this year with some new offensive playmakers up front. So let's go through some of their top-graded players offensively returning this season.
Yeah, I think the Dan Mullen signing, or him taking over as head coach, definitely has Gators fans excited. Getting back to that same offense that led them to the national championship with Tebow. But we have to replenish those playmakers. But you still have guys like LaMichael Pirine at running back, who was excellent last year. We'll talk a little bit about Malik Davis, who had just a small sample size of really good play. And then up front, the offensive line, it's been up and down the last couple of years, but you have guys like Jaewon Taylor up front at right tackle. Brett Hagee had a really nice year at guard. So there's been some inconsistencies on the offensive line, but there's a lot of experience coming back, and I do think they could take a big step forward. And then you look at wide receiver with Tyrie Cleveland. He was a big play threat, had that great game-winning catch against Tennessee as well. So there are signs of hope, at least with the playmakers and on the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think the Mullen factor can't be understated, because what he did his first time around there was fantastic as the offensive coordinator, and he made a lot of magic there at Mississippi State with not a lot of talent.
Right.
There was not a ton of, he wasn't recruiting a bunch of five-stars there at Mississippi State, and they still had a lot of success offensively. So that's obviously the encouraging thing there. Let's flip, though, to the other side of the ball now, defense, which has been the calling card of Florida over the past handful of years. 6 straight years now with first-rounders there on that defense going. Let's see what the talent they got bring back is.
Yeah, I think it's a little underrated just how well Will Muschamp recruited on the defensive side of the ball. I know the offense never really got it going under him, but we just look at, out of their top 5 returning right now, 3 guys who were essentially pure edge defenders: Ja'Kai Polite, CeCe Jefferson, Jabari Zuniga. They can move those guys around the defensive line. So those guys are all bringing a lot of production back. You have a guy like Jaewon Taylor, who didn't play a ton of snaps, but played well when he had a chance to. And then Marco Wilson, very good first showing last year. So it might not be the same level of defensive talent they're used to, but that's 3 really good defensive linemen who could really have breakout seasons.
Yeah, and they've lost 4 guys over the past 2 years, 4 second-round picks in Duke Dawson, Marcus May, Quincy Wilson, Tease Tabor from that secondary. Are there guys that replenish? You mentioned Jaewon Taylor. See a guy at safety who, after a limited amount of snaps, can come in and maybe get to that level of a first day, second day sort of draft pick?
I think he's the type of guy that we're looking for a potential breakout season. I mentioned Marco Wilson. Like at Florida, there's always this revolving door of defensive talent, and I gave Muschamp a ton of credit. We'll see if they can kind of keep up with what he was bringing in. You have David Reese at linebacker as well, who's done some nice things. So it's just a lot of new names. We need new stars at Florida on their defense this year.
Those are the guys to watch. So those are the highest graded returning players. But let's look at the most important position on the football field, because that was the biggest issue for the Gators last year. That seemingly has been the biggest issue for the past handful of years there for Florida. Felipe Franks wins the starting job. He won the starting job over Malik Zaire a season ago, struggled a bit, but there's reason for hope for him at the quarterback position.
Yeah, he's still just a redshirt sophomore. When you look at the opportunity that he's had, he has a cannon for an arm. I mean, he made probably the best throw I think we've ever seen in PFF history last year to win the game against Tennessee, 70-plus yards in the air, hitting Tyrie Cleveland in stride. So we know that the potential is there. The big arm, maybe they use him a little bit in the designed running game like Mullen's done at Mississippi State with big guys like Nick Fitzgerald and Dak Prescott. Still a different style quarterback with Franks. But I think it's about scheming some open throws, scheming some easier throws, and then Franks just has to improve his accuracy from what we saw a year ago. Take some of those easy opportunities and just up that completion percentage just a little bit, run that efficient pass game.
And one thing that could take some pressure off him is this offensive line that has the potential to be a lot better than it was a season ago. You look at Jaewon Taylor, who already sort of touched on as a true freshman a season ago, was one of their highest graded players. Martez Ivy at left tackle was a 5-star coming in. Hasn't quite lived up to that billing, but the freakish athletic potential is still there.
Right.
What can you expect from this offensive line?
So the thing about this offensive line, when you mentioned Jaewon Taylor, when you have a guy like Fred Johnson who's at least flash. We have a guy like T.J. McCoy who's battling for the starting center spot, who's 2 years removed from just actually playing really well up front for the Gators. You mentioned Ivy, where he's at least flashed that 5-star potential at times. So there's a lot of potential there, and I do think when you stack up all the stats, I'm looking at guys playing 700 snaps, 500 snaps. There's a lot of experience coming back up front. So for the first time in a while, I think there's a little bit more hope up front for Florida with all these guys who at some point have at least played well. Now they have a ton of experience.
Yeah, and experience is such a huge factor. As we've seen in our college grading, guys get better seemingly every single year. You rarely see a guy take a step back along the offensive line
on the
at the college
yeah.
level. Yeah, this is a place where you definitely see a career trend upwards at the college level. So a lot of reason for hope there. Give me a breakout player, though, because this team, like you mentioned, not a ton of talent returning from a season ago. They need someone to break out and be a star on this. Give me one guy who you think, or maybe two guys that you think could be breakout in 2018.
We'll take a look at running back Malik Davis. He didn't have a ton of opportunities last year, but one of our favorite ways to separate the running back from the offensive line is elusive rating, essentially saying how well did you make guys miss and pick up yards after contact. He was a 126.6 last year on only 79 attempts. That's fantastic. Avoided 23 tackles on 79 attempts. So give Malik Davis a few more opportunities. That's a big play threat right there. So I think he has a chance, to be one of those breakout players that we see. And there's a lot of guys like that on this Florida roster who didn't have a ton of snaps, but they can, when they get the opportunity, be household names by the end of the year.
Yeah, that ratio of 23 broken tackles on 79 attempts, or 79 touches. You think about a normal, full-time running back in college football will get 4 times that. If you got 4 times that many broken tackles, he's leading the country.
Absolutely.
Next year. So big year from him, hopefully. Give me the outlook, though, for them as a whole this season.
I think when you look at the SEC East, Florida, they won it back-to-back years in a weak SEC East. Of course, Georgia was incredible last year. Georgia is loaded once again, so it's going to be challenging to get back to the top. But if you look, South Carolina has a lot of high expectations, but Florida's still right in the mix there. And if Georgia does have a few slip-ups along the way, that's how Florida's won the SEC East in 2 out of the last 3 years. So I think they'll be able to compete. They'll be right in the mix. They have to take care of business early like they generally have against the Kentuckys of the world and the Tennessees of the world. But they'll be right in the mix, especially if a lot of these defensive players that we talked about continue that lineage of just great explosive defensive talent coming out of Florida.
Yeah, and I don't think the Mullen factor can be understated. Coaching so huge at the college level. Can't wait to see what they're like this season. That wraps up, though, the Florida preview, brought to you by Eckrich, the official smoked sausage of the Florida Gators. Don't forget to pick up Eckrich smoked sausage at your local grocery store for this weekend's tailgate or home gate party. And make sure to visit EckrichFootball.com for great game day recipes and to enter the season-long $1 Million Challenge.